The blood on Vivienne Norton's hands had come from a broken whiskey bottle, but the ladies of Golden, Colorado, did not care about the truth when gossip tasted sweeter than lies. She pressed a cloth against the cut on her palm while standing behind the bar of the Red Garter Saloon, watching through the window as three women crossed to the other side of the dusty street, rather than walk past the establishment that had been her home for all 22 years of her life. The year was 1876, and respectability meant everything in a town still finding its footing between lawlessness and civilization. Vivienne had never known her mother, only the stories whispered by the saloon girls who had raised her. Her mother had died bringing her into this world, and her father, a gambler named Thomas Norton, had lasted only 3 more years before a bullet found him in a card game gone wrong. The owner of the Red Garter, a woman named Margaret Sullivan with a heart bigger than her reputation, had taken Vivienne in without hesitation. Margaret had made sure Vivienne learned to read and write, to keep accounts, to play piano, and most importantly, to defend herself in a world that would judge her for circumstances beyond her control. "Do not let them see it hurts you," Margaret said from the doorway leading to the kitchen, her graying hair pinned up in its usual practical bun. She was 60 now, her face lined with the kind of wisdom that came from surviving decades in a profession that chewed up most women and spit them out before 30. "I am not hurt," Vivienne lied, wrapping her hand more tightly. "Just bleeding. I meant your heart, girl, and you know it." Vivienne did know it. That morning, she had attempted to purchase fabric at the general store, and Mrs. Henderson had loudly announced that she would not serve anyone who lived in sin and encouraged others to do the same. Never mind that Vivienne had never worked as one of the girls upstairs. Never mind that she kept the books, managed the kitchen, and played piano for the crowds. Never mind that Margaret ran the cleanest, safest establishment between Denver and the mining camps, where the girls were protected and paid fairly. None of that mattered to the respectable women of Golden, who needed someone to look down upon to feel elevated themselves. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the saloon floor when the stranger walked in. Vivienne looked up from the accounts she was tallying, her green eyes assessing him with the practiced caution Margaret had taught her. He was tall, with broad shoulders that spoke of hard work and harder living. His dark hair needed cutting, and several days of stubble shadowed his jaw. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, gray as a winter storm, and just as turbulent. "We are not open yet," Vivienne said, her voice steady despite the way her heart had inexplicably quickened. "I am looking for work, not whiskey," he replied, his voice a low rumble that seemed to resonate in her chest. "Heard in town that Margaret Sullivan sometimes needs hired hands for protection." "What is your name?" "Yates Sullivan, no relation to the owner, far as I know. It is a common enough name." "And where are you from, Yates Sullivan?" "Most recently, a cattle drive from Texas. Before that, too many places to count." He shifted his weight, and Vivienne noticed he favored his left leg slightly. "I can handle trouble without starting it, and I do not drink while working. If you need references, I can provide them, though they will take time to verify." Margaret emerged from the back, her sharp eyes taking in the stranger, with decades of experience reading men. "You were military," she said flatly. "Yes, madam, Union cavalry. That was over for me in 73. "Why did it take you 3 years to drift this way?" "Had to remember how to be around people again, without expecting bullets." His honesty was disarming. Most men would have offered excuses or bravado. Some days are still harder than others. Margaret glanced at Vivienne, a silent conversation passing between them. They had gone through 4 different hired men in the past 6 months. 2 had gotten too drunk and been dismissed. 1 had tried to take liberties with one of the girls and had been run out of town. The last had simply disappeared one night with the week's whiskey profits. "We have a room out back," Margaret said finally. $20 a month plus meals. You keep trouble out, and you do not make trouble yourself. You drink on your own time, not mine. And if I catch you treating my girls with anything less than respect, you will answer to me and my shotgun. We clear?" "Yes, madam, we are clear. Vivienne will show you where you can bunk and what your duties are. If you last a week without causing problems, we will discuss making it permanent." Vivienne set down her pen, acutely aware of how Yates's eyes followed her as she stood. She was not traditionally beautiful by the standards of the day. Her red hair was too wild, her frame too thin from years of stretching resources, her hands too rough from work. But she held herself with a dignity that made people look twice, a quiet strength that came from surviving in a world determined to break her. "Follow me," she said, leading him through the saloon toward the back door. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a trunk for personal belongings. A single window looked out onto the alley behind the saloon. "It is not much," Vivienne said. "It is more than I have had in a long time," Yates replied, setting down the worn saddlebags that contained everything he owned. "Thank you." "Do not thank me yet. You have not seen a Saturday night crowd." The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "I have handled worse than drunk minors, I promise you." "Maybe so." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Mr. Sullivan?" "Just Yates, please." "Yates, then. The girls who work here are not property. They are not available for assumption or negotiation. Margaret protects them, and so do I. If you have a problem with that, leave now before we waste each other's time." He met her eyes directly. "I have seen what happens to women in this world when nobody protects them. You will have no problems from me on that account or any other." Something in his voice told her he was speaking from painful experience, but she did not press. Everyone in the West had ghosts they were running from or toward. She nodded once and left him to settle in. That evening, the saloon filled with its usual clientele, miners and cowboys and businessmen who left their respectability at the door along with their hats. Vivienne played piano in the corner, her fingers dancing across the keys with the ease of long practice. She played mostly cheerful songs, the kind that encouraged drinking and laughter, but occasionally she would slip in something softer, something that reminded the men in the room that they had hearts as well as thirsts. Yates stationed himself near the door, his presence both unobtrusive and unmistakable. He had changed into clean clothes, though they were as worn as the ones he had arrived in. Throughout the night, Vivienne watched him from the corner of her eye. He did not drink. He did not leer at the girls. When a fight broke out between two miners arguing over a card game, he stepped in with calm efficiency, separating them and suggesting they settle their dispute outside if they must, but not in Margaret's establishment. "You have a gift for that," Vivienne said, during a break in her playing, bringing him a glass of water. "For what?" "Ending things before they begin. Learned it the hard way. Violence has a rhythm to it. If you can interrupt that rhythm early enough, you can stop the dance before it starts." He accepted the water with a nod of thanks. "You play beautifully. You do not have to flatter me. You already have the job." "I am not flattering you. I am stating a fact." His gray eyes held hers. "Where did you learn?" "Here. Margaret hired a piano teacher for me when I was 7. She said every girl should have something that belonged to her alone, something nobody could take away. She seems like a good woman. She is the best woman I have ever known." Vivienne's voice held fierce loyalty. "The town treats her like she is less than nothing, but she has more integrity in her little finger than most of them have in their entire bodies." "And you? How does the town treat you?" The question was quiet, but pointed. Vivienne felt something in her chest tighten. "Like I am a contamination? Like I carry some disease that might infect their daughters if I get too close. That must be hard." "It is what it is." She started to turn away, unwilling to show vulnerability to this stranger, but his next words stopped her. "My mother was a laundress for a brothel in St. Louis," Yates said quietly. "She was not one of the girls, but it did not matter to the respectable folks. They treated her like dirt, and they treated me worse. I know something about being judged for circumstances you did not choose." Vivienne looked back at him, seeing past the rough exterior to something raw and honest underneath. "What happened to her?" "Cholera, when I was 14. After that, I lied about my age and joined the army. Seemed like the only place that would not care where I came from. I am sorry. Me too." He took a drink of water. "But she taught me something important before she died. She said that where you come from does not define you. How you handle it does." The words settled into Vivienne's heart like seeds waiting for the right moment to grow. She returned to the piano, but something had shifted between them. Some understanding that went beyond employer and employee, beyond stranger and stranger. The week passed, and Yates proved himself reliable, steady, and true to his word. Margaret made his position permanent, and a routine developed. Vivienne found herself looking for him throughout the day, noticing the way he repaired the loose step on the back porch without being asked, how he spoke gently to the saloon girls even when turning down their invitations, how he checked the locks every night before retiring to his small room. On Sunday morning, when the saloon was closed and the town went to church, Vivienne walked to the mercantile to attempt, once again, to purchase supplies. Yates appeared beside her as she reached the main street, dressed in his cleanest shirt. "You do not have to accompany me," she said. "I know, but I am going the same direction." It was a lie, and they both knew it. The mercantile was the opposite direction from anywhere he might have legitimate business. But Vivienne did not argue. Mrs. Henderson stood behind the counter, her mouth pursing when Vivienne entered. "I told you before, we do not serve your kind here." "My money is as good as anyone's," Vivienne replied evenly, though her hands trembled slightly as she held out her list. "Your money is tainted by sin and degradation. I will not have it in my shop." Yates stepped forward, his tall frame suddenly seeming to fill the entire store. "Madam, I am new in town, so maybe I am missing something, but it seems to me that refusing to conduct business based on prejudice rather than actual wrongdoing is not very Christian." "Mrs. Henderson's face flushed red. "How dare you? This woman was raised in a house of ill repute. She has no morals, no decency. She is not fit for respectable society." "This woman," Yates said, his voice dropping to something cold and dangerous, "has more decency than most people I have met. She works hard, she has never harmed anyone, and she is trying to conduct legitimate business. If you refuse her, that speaks to your character, not hers." "Who are you to lecture me? You work for that wicked place, too." "I do, and I have seen more wickedness in churches than I ever saw in saloons. So your moral high ground might not be as solid as you think." He took Vivienne's list and began collecting the items himself. "We will take these. You can either accept payment or we can discuss with the sheriff how you are violating commerce laws." "There are no such laws. Are you willing to bet your business license on that?" Yates's bluff was perfect, delivered with such confidence that Mrs. Henderson wavered. Finally, with poor grace, she accepted Vivienne's money and wrapped the purchases. Vivienne walked out with her head high, though her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Outside, she turned to Yates. "You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did." "Why?" He looked at her for a long moment, and Vivienne saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "Because it was the right thing to do, and because watching people treat you like you are less than what you are makes me angry in a way I cannot quite explain. I have dealt with it my whole life. That does not make it right. It does not mean you should have to keep dealing with it." He shifted the packages in his arms. "Where you were raised does not define you, Vivienne. It made you strong, stronger than any of those hypocrites who hide behind respectability while harboring cruelty in their hearts." The words hit her like a physical force. All her life, she had been told that her upbringing in the Red Garter Saloon was a stain she could never wash away. But Yates saw it differently. He saw strength where others saw shame. "Thank you," she whispered. "Nothing to thank me for." But the gentleness in his voice belied his words. They walked back to the saloon in comfortable silence, and Vivienne realized with a start that she felt different, lighter somehow, as if a burden she had carried for so long had been momentarily lifted. Margaret noticed the change immediately. "Something happened," she said, when Vivienne came into the kitchen to put away the supplies. "Yates stood up for me at the mercantile. He told Mrs. Henderson that where I was raised made me strong." Margaret's lined face softened. "He is right, you know. You are the strongest person I have ever known, Vivienne. You have taken everything this town has thrown at you and remained kind, remained decent. That takes a strength most people will never understand. Sometimes I do not feel strong. Sometimes I feel like I am barely holding together. That is when you are strongest, when you hold together despite everything trying to break you apart." Margaret squeezed her hand. "That man cares for you. I can see it in how he looks at you when he thinks nobody is watching. We barely know each other. Some people you know in a moment, others you can spend a lifetime with and never really know at all." Margaret returned to kneading bread dough. "Do not dismiss what might be, just because you are afraid of what the town will say. They will talk regardless. You might as well give them something worth talking about." Vivienne thought about Margaret's words as she went about her daily tasks. She found herself watching Yates more openly now, noticing details she had tried to ignore before. The way his hands, scarred and calloused from hard living, could be surprisingly gentle when he helped carry in supplies. The way he listened when people spoke, really listened, as if their words mattered. The way his whole face transformed on the rare occasions he smiled. That evening, after the last customer had stumbled out and the girls had retired to their rooms, Vivienne sat at the piano, playing softly. She did not realize Yates had entered until he spoke. "I apologize if I overstepped today." She looked up, her fingers stilling on the keys. "You did not overstep. You stood up for me when nobody else would. Still, I should have asked if you wanted me to intervene. Yates, I have been fighting my own battles my entire life. Having someone stand beside me for once was not an insult. It was a gift." She gestured to the bench beside her. "Do you play?" "Not even a little bit, but I like listening." He sat down, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him in the cool night air. Vivienne began to play again, something slow and wistful that she had composed herself over the years. The melody spoke of loneliness and longing, of strength and survival, of hope despite everything. "That is beautiful," Yates said when she finished. "What is it called?" "Nothing. I never named it. It is just something I play when I need to remind myself why I keep going." "You have thought about leaving." It was not a question. Vivienne nodded slowly. 1,000 times. I have enough saved that I could go somewhere else, start over where nobody knows me, but Margaret needs me. The girls need me. And I would be running away, letting the judgment of small-minded people dictate my choices. I do not want to give them that power. That takes courage. It takes stubbornness, maybe. I am not sure it is the same thing. It is. Yates turned slightly on the bench to face her. "Vivienne, I need to tell you something, and I'm going to make a mess of it because I have never been good with words. But since I met you, I have not been able to stop thinking about you. Not just because you are beautiful, though you are, but because you are the strongest, most genuine person I have met in a long time. You do not hide who you are or apologize for circumstances beyond your control. You stand tall even when everything is trying to knock you down. That does more to me than I know how to explain." Vivienne's heart hammered in her chest. "I think about you too," she admitted quietly. "I try not to, because I know nothing good can come of it. The town already despises me. If they think I am involved with you romantically, it will only confirm everything they believe about me. Then let them believe it. Let them talk. We will know the truth, and the truth is that you deserve to be cared for by someone who sees your worth." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her cheek with his rough palm. "You deserve to be happy, Vivienne, even if the town does not think so." She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly at the gentleness of it. When had anyone last touched her with tenderness instead of judgment? "I am afraid," she whispered. "Of what?" "Of wanting something I cannot have, of letting myself care, and then having it taken away. I have lost everyone I ever cared about. My parents, though, I barely knew them. Other people who worked here who moved on or died. I have learned to protect myself by not wanting too much. I cannot promise I will not leave. None of us know what tomorrow brings." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "But I can promise that for as long as I am here, I will stand beside you. I will see you for who you are, not what other people say you are. And I will care for you in whatever way you will let me." Vivienne opened her eyes and found his face inches from hers. She could see the sincerity in his gray eyes, the vulnerability in letting himself speak such truths. Slowly, giving him the same chance to retreat that he had given her, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, two people afraid of breaking something precious. Then Yates's hand slid into her hair, and Vivienne's fingers gripped his shirt, and the kiss deepened into something that spoke of months of loneliness and the sudden shock of connection. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I should not have done that," Vivienne said, though she made no move to pull away. "Why not?" "Because now I will want to do it again." "I fail to see the problem with that." There was warmth in his voice, affection and humor mixing together. "Yates, this is complicated. I am not like other women. I cannot give you a respectable courtship, a respectable future. I will always be the girl raised in the saloon. Vivienne, I was a soldier who watched boys die in mud and blood for causes they did not understand. After the war, I drifted for 3 years, trying to forget what I had seen and done. I am not exactly a prize catch either." He took both her hands in his. "But maybe two people who have been judged unfairly by the world can build something real together. Maybe we can give each other what nobody else will, which is acceptance and understanding, and someone to stand beside when the world gets hard. You make it sound simple. It is not simple. Nothing worth having ever is, but it is possible if we are both brave enough to try. Vivienne looked at their joined hands, his so large and scarred, hers small and ink-stained from keeping the books. They were an unlikely pair by any measure, but Margaret's words echoed in her mind about giving the town something worth talking about, and more importantly, about not dismissing what might be out of fear. "I want to try," she said finally. "I want to be brave enough to try." The smile that crossed Yates's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Then we will try together." The following weeks brought a shift in the atmosphere of the Red Garter Saloon. Everyone noticed the way Yates and Vivienne gravitated toward each other, the small touches and shared glances that spoke of growing intimacy. Margaret watched with approval, the saloon girls with romantic sighs, and the customers with varying degrees of interest or indifference. But the town noticed too, and their reaction was less kind. Vivienne found herself even more ostracized than before. Women who had once simply avoided her now whispered loudly as she passed. The butcher began charging her higher prices. The banker suggested, with false politeness, that perhaps she should consider keeping her money somewhere else. "Let me go with you into town," Yates urged one morning after Vivienne returned from a particularly unpleasant encounter at the post office. "No, that will only make it worse. They will say I need a man to protect me, that I am weak." She set down the letters she had finally managed to mail after the postmaster's wife had lectured her for 20 minutes about morality. "I will handle this myself." "Vivienne, there is a difference between being strong and being stubborn. Is there? Because from where I stand, they look remarkably similar." She immediately regretted the sharp tone. "I am sorry. I am taking my frustration out on you, and you do not deserve that." Yates pulled her into his arms, and she went willingly, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady thud of his heart. They had been careful not to be too open with their affection, knowing it would fuel the gossip, but in private moments like these, Vivienne allowed herself to accept the comfort he offered. "I hate seeing you hurt," he said quietly. "I hate being hurt, but I will not let them drive me away or make me ashamed of who I am." She pulled back to look up at him. "And I will not be ashamed of being with you." "Good, because I am not ashamed either." He kissed her forehead. "But I am worried. The talk is getting worse. Some of the men at the saloon have been making comments, and not the good-natured ribbing kind. There is a mean edge to it." "What kind of comments?" "Suggesting that if you are with me, you might be available to others. Saying that a woman raised in a saloon cannot possibly understand decent behavior." His jaw tightened. "I have been setting them straight, but words have a way of spreading." Vivienne felt cold despite the warmth of his embrace. She had dealt with gossip and judgment her entire life, but this felt different, more threatening. "What do you think will happen?" "I do not know, but I think we need to be careful. Both of us." His caution proved warranted 2 nights later when a group of men from one of the mining camps came into the saloon, already drunk and looking for trouble. Vivienne recognized the type immediately: bullies emboldened by whiskey, and the pack mentality that turned cowards into brutes. "There she is!" one of them called out, pointing at Vivienne at the piano. "The famous saloon girl who thinks she is better than everyone else." Vivienne kept playing, her face carefully neutral. "Do not engage," Margaret had taught her. "Do not give them ammunition." But they were not interested in being ignored. They surrounded the piano, leering down at her with faces flushed from alcohol and malice. "I said, 'There she is,'" the leader repeated. "Not even going to acknowledge us? That is not very friendly." "Gentlemen, I am simply here to play music," Vivienne said evenly. "If you would like to request a song, I am happy to oblige." "I got a request. How about you come upstairs with me and show me what you learned growing up in this place?" "I am not one of the working girls. If you are interested in their company, you will need to speak with them directly and treat them with respect." "Respect? For whores!" The man laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You think you are different from them just because you play piano? You are all the same, every woman in this place." Yates appeared so suddenly it was as if he materialized from shadow. "That is enough. You can leave now, or I can help you leave. Your choice." The miner was large, made larger by drink and aggression, but Yates did not seem concerned. He stood between Vivienne and the men with a stillness that was somehow more threatening than violence. And who are you to tell us what to do? I am the man who keeps the peace in this establishment. And right now, you are disturbing that peace. Yates's voice was calm, almost conversational. Walk away while you still can. You think you can take all of us? I know I can. The question is whether you want to find out the hard way. There was something in Yates's eyes, something that spoke of experience with violence, that made even drunk men reconsider their choices. The leader hesitated, calculation warring with pride on his face. Finally, he spat on the floor near Vivienne's feet and gestured to his friends. This place is not worth our money anyway. Come on. They left in a wave of muttered curses and bravado, slamming the door behind them. The remaining customers returned to their drinks and conversations, the moment of tension dissolving as quickly as it had formed. Vivienne's hands shook as she tried to place them back on the piano keys. Yates knelt beside her, his large hands covering her trembling ones. Are you all right? Yes, no, I do not know. She took a shaking breath. That was different. Usually they just talk. They do not get that close, that aggressive. I know, that is what worries me. Yates looked toward the door, his expression grim. Word is spreading that you are with me, and some of these men see that as permission to treat you worse, as if being with a hired hand confirms everything they want to believe about you. So what do? We stay careful, we stay together, and we remember that their cruelty says everything about them and nothing about you. He helped her stand. Come on, let Margaret know what happened. She needs to be aware in case they come back. Margaret listened to their account with a deepening frown. This is getting out of hand. I have never seen the town so worked up over gossip before. It is not just gossip anymore, Yates said. It is becoming something uglier. I think part of it is that Vivienne refuses to bow her head and accept their judgment. That threatens them. And part of it is me, Vivienne added quietly. I have always been different, but now I am openly defying their expectations by being with you. They cannot stand that I might actually be happy. Bunch of hypocrites, Margaret muttered. Half the men who come here on Saturday nights sit in church on Sunday mornings acting holier than thou. But a young woman trying to live her life honestly? That they cannot abide. She looked between Yates and Vivienne. What do you two want? Because I can see how you feel about each other, and I support it. But I need to know if you are prepared for how bad this might get. Vivienne reached for Yates's hand, finding it waiting for hers. I want to stay. I want to stop letting other people's small-mindedness dictate how I live. And I want to be with Yates, openly, without shame. Same, Yates said simply. I am not running because some people cannot handle their own prejudices. And I am not giving up the best thing that has happened to me in years because of gossip. Margaret nodded slowly. Then we prepare. We make sure the doors are secure, that everyone knows to be vigilant, and we stand together. That is how we have always survived, and that is how we will keep surviving. The next Sunday, Vivienne made a decision. Instead of avoiding town during church hours, she walked down the main street in her best dress with Yates beside her. They did not go to the church itself, knowing they would not be welcome, but they walked past it with their heads high, making it clear they were not hiding. The congregation exiting after services stopped and stared. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Vivienne felt the weight of their judgment like a physical thing, but she kept walking, kept her expression calm and dignified. Shameless, someone said, just loud enough to be heard. Absolutely shameless, another voice agreed. But not everyone joined in the condemnation. Vivienne saw a few faces that showed sympathy rather than scorn, people who perhaps understood what it meant to be judged unfairly. A young woman with kind eyes actually nodded to her, a small gesture of acknowledgement that meant more than she could express. That was brave, Yates said when they had passed the church and were walking toward the edge of town. That was terrifying, Vivienne corrected, but necessary. I am tired of hiding. They walked to a spot overlooking the town, where the mountains rose up in the distance and the late autumn air carried the scent of pine and approaching winter. Yates spread his coat on the ground, and they sat together, looking out at the landscape that was beautiful, despite the ugliness of some of the people who inhabited it. Tell me about the war, Vivienne said after a while. You never talk about it. Yates was quiet for so long, she thought he would not answer. Finally he spoke, his voice distant. I was 19 when I enlisted. Thought it would be glorious, thought I would be a hero. Instead, I watched boys younger than me die in agony from wounds that should never have happened. I killed men who were probably just as scared and confused as I was. I followed orders that made no sense and saw commanders make decisions that cost lives for no good reason. He picked up a small stone, turning it over in his hands. When it was over, I did not know how to be a normal person anymore. Everything seemed both too loud and too quiet. I would wake up expecting bullets and realize I was in a regular bed in a regular room. It took me a long time to feel like I belonged anywhere. "Do you feel like you belong here?" He looked at her, his gray eyes clear and honest. "I feel like I belong with you. The where does not matter as much as the who." Vivienne leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. "I feel the same way. I have never felt like I belonged anywhere except with Margaret and the girls at the saloon. But with you it is different. With you I feel like I could belong anywhere as long as we were together. Then maybe that is what we build. Not a place, but a belonging between us. Something that is ours regardless of what anyone else thinks or says. I would like that." She lifted her head to look at him. "Yates, I am falling in love with you. I tried not to, tried to protect myself, but it is happening anyway." His hand cupped her face with infinite gentleness. "I am already in love with you, have been since the day you played that unnamed song, and I realized you were the strongest, most genuine person I had ever met." Their kiss was sweet and fierce at once, a promise and a claiming. When they finally pulled apart, Vivienne felt as if something fundamental had shifted in her world. She had spent her entire life being told she was less than, that her upbringing made her unworthy of love and respect. But Yates saw past all of that to who she really was, and he loved her not in spite of her history, but because of how it had shaped her. Winter arrived early that year, bringing snow that turned golden Colorado into a landscape of white and gray. The saloon became a haven of warmth and light, drawing customers who wanted to escape the cold and the isolation of the season. Vivienne played longer sets at the piano, and Yates kept the fires burning and the whiskey flowing. Their relationship deepened with the passing weeks. They stole moments together whenever they could, conversations that lasted long into the night, kisses in shadowed hallways, the simple comfort of being near each other during the daily routines. Margaret watched them with approval, tinged with worry, knowing that the town's animosity had not faded, but merely gone quieter, waiting. In early December, a circuit preacher came through town, a fire and brimstone type who saw sin everywhere he looked. He held revival meetings in the church, and his sermons focused heavily on the corruption that festered in places like saloons, where innocent souls were led astray by women of questionable virtue. The impact was immediate. Customers who had been regulars at the Red Garter stopped coming, afraid of being associated with the establishment the preacher had essentially condemned from the pulpit. The few who still came were nervous, looking over their shoulders as if expecting divine retribution or social consequences. "We are losing money," Margaret said grimly, looking over the books with Vivienne. "If this keeps up, we will not be able to pay everyone." "It is not fair," Vivienne said, anger heating her words. "We run an honest business. The girls are treated well. We do not water down the drinks or cheat at cards. But one preacher passing through town can destroy our livelihood with words. Fair has nothing to do with it. Power does. And right now, that preacher has the power because he tells people what they want to hear, which is that they are righteous and anyone different is wicked." Margaret rubbed her temples tiredly. "I have been through hard times before. We will survive this too. But it is going to get worse before it gets better." She was right. The preacher's influence spread like a contagion. A group of town women, emboldened by his rhetoric, started a petition to have the Red Garter shut down permanently. They stood outside the saloon during operating hours with signs denouncing the establishment and everyone associated with it. Vivienne watched from the window as Mrs. Henderson led the group in prayer, loudly asking God to cleanse the town of wickedness and depravity. The irony was not lost on her that these same women employed girls who had nowhere else to go, paid them barely enough to survive, and would condemn those same girls instantly if they turned to the kind of work the saloon offered for better wages and safer conditions. "I want to go talk to them," Vivienne said. "That is a terrible idea," Yates replied, standing beside her at the window. "Probably, but I am going to do it anyway." She grabbed her shawl and headed for the door before he could argue further. The cold hit her like a slap when she stepped outside, but she barely noticed. She walked up to the group of women with her head high, stopping a few feet away from Mrs. Henderson. "May I speak?" Vivienne asked, her voice carrying in the winter air. "We have nothing to say to you," Mrs. Henderson snapped. "Then just listen. You do not have to respond." Vivienne took a breath, steadying herself. "I have lived in this town my entire life. I have never stolen, never lied, never harmed a single person. I work hard, I pay my bills, I contribute to this community. But you have decided I am worthless because of where I was raised, something I had absolutely no control over. You have denied me basic courtesy, basic humanity, because you need someone to look down on to feel better about yourselves." "You live in sin," one woman shouted. "What sin? Working, earning an honest living, caring for people who have nowhere else to go?" Vivienne's voice strengthened. "The women who work at the Red Garter are there because they have no other options. They have been abandoned by families, widowed by accidents and illness, or fled from violent situations. Margaret gives them safety, fair pay, and dignity. What have you given them? Judgment, condemnation. You force them into circumstances and then despise them for surviving those circumstances the only way they can. The Bible is clear about such things," Mrs. Henderson said coldly. "The Bible is also clear about loving your neighbor, about not judging lest you be judged, about helping the poor and the vulnerable, but you seem to have forgotten those parts." Vivienne looked around at all of them. "I am not asking you to like me, I am not even asking you to accept me, but I am asking you to recognize that I am a human being deserving of basic respect, and so is everyone else at the Red Garter. We are not your enemies. We are just trying to survive in a world that makes survival very difficult for anyone who does not fit a narrow definition of acceptable." She turned and walked back to the saloon, her heart pounding so hard she felt lightheaded. Behind her, the women were silent, and she did not know if that meant she had made any impact or simply shocked them into temporary speechlessness. Yates met her at the door, pulling her into the warmth. "That was either very brave or very foolish." "Probably both." Vivienne was shaking, adrenaline and cold combining. "But I had to say something. I had to try." Margaret appeared with a cup of hot tea. "I heard it all through the window. Well said, girl. I am proud of you. Do you think it will change anything? Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but seeds have a way of growing when you least expect it." Margaret squeezed her shoulder. "Sometimes the bravest thing is speaking truth when everyone wants you to stay silent." The circuit preacher left town after 2 weeks, moving on to spread his message elsewhere. The women's group disbanded shortly after. Whether from guilt or simply loss of momentum, Vivienne did not know. Slowly, some of the regular customers began returning to the Red Garter, though never quite as many as before. Christmas arrived, and Margaret insisted on decorating the saloon with pine boughs and ribbon, creating a festive atmosphere despite their struggles. On Christmas Eve, they closed early and had a small celebration among themselves, the saloon girls and Margaret and Vivienne and Yates, a makeshift family bound by circumstance and choice. Vivienne played carols on the piano while everyone sang, voices blending in harmony that spoke of shared experiences and mutual support. Yates stood beside her, occasionally joining in when he knew the words, his deep voice a counterpoint to her playing. After the others had gone to bed, Vivienne and Yates sat together in the quiet saloon, the only light coming from the banked fire in the stove and the moonlight streaming through the windows. "I have something for you," Yates said, pulling a small wrapped package from his pocket. Vivienne opened it carefully, finding a delicate silver chain with a small pendant in the shape of a piano. "Yates, this is beautiful. It must have cost a fortune." "Not a fortune, but more than I probably should have spent. But I wanted you to have something that reminded you of your strength. You make music out of life even when life tries to beat you down. That is worth celebrating." She fastened the chain around her neck, feeling the pendant rest against her skin. "Thank you. I wish I had something to give you in return. You have given me more than you know. Purpose, belonging, love." He pulled her close. "Those are the greatest gifts I could ask for." They kissed by the dying fire, and Vivienne felt a contentment she had never experienced before. Despite everything the town had thrown at them, despite the struggles and the judgment, she was happy. She was loved. She was home, not because of a place, but because of the man beside her. The new year brought changes. In January, a newspaper reporter from Denver came through Golden, researching stories about Colorado mining towns. He stopped at the Red Garter, intrigued by the stories he had heard about the conflict between the saloon and the respectable citizens. Margaret was wary, but Vivienne convinced her to let the man interview them. They had nothing to hide, and perhaps an outside perspective could help shift the narrative. The reporter, a middle-aged man named Samuel Price, spent 3 days in Golden talking to people at the saloon and around town. He watched Vivienne play piano, spoke with the working girls about their experiences, and interviewed Margaret about her business practices. He also talked to Mrs. Henderson and the circuit preacher's supporters, getting their side of the story. When the article was published in the Denver paper 2 weeks later, it caused an uproar. Price had written a thoughtful, nuanced piece about the complexities of morality in frontier towns, the hypocrisy of respectable society, and the quiet dignity of those living on its margins. He painted Vivienne as a sympathetic figure, a young woman trying to build a life despite circumstances beyond her control. He quoted Yates saying, "Where you were raised made you strong," and the line became a focal point of the article. Copies of the paper made their way to Golden, and reactions were mixed. Some people were furious, feeling their town had been portrayed negatively. Others, particularly some of the younger residents and a few business owners who valued the saloon's contribution to the local economy, were more sympathetic. The article also brought unexpected attention. A theater owner from Denver wrote to Vivienne, offering her a position as a piano player in his establishment. The salary was substantial, more than she made at the Red Garter, and it came with a level of respectability that Golden would never offer her. "You should take it," Margaret said when Vivienne showed her the letter. "I cannot leave you." "Of course you can. This is an opportunity for a real future, Vivienne. A chance to be seen for your talent rather than judged for your past." "But what about the saloon? What about you and the girls?" "We will manage. We always have." Margaret's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I love you like you were my own daughter, and because I love you, I want you to have every chance I never did. Take this job. Build a life. Be happy." Vivienne looked at the letter, then at Yates, who had been silent throughout the conversation. "What do you think?" "I think Margaret is right. This is a chance you should not pass up." "But what about us?" "We will figure it out." His voice was steady, but she could see the pain in his eyes. "Denver is not that far. We can make it work if we want to." "If?" The word stung. "When?" he corrected quickly. "When we want to, which is always." But Vivienne heard what he had not said, the uncertainty creeping into even his certainty. Long-distance relationships were difficult under the best circumstances, and these were far from the best circumstances. She would be building a new life in Denver. He would be here, working at a saloon in a town that hated both of them. The distance would be more than miles. "I need to think about it," she said finally. She spent a week wrestling with the decision. The logical choice was clear. The Denver position offered better pay, better prospects, and an escape from the constant judgment of Golden. But it also meant leaving behind everything she had known, everyone who had supported her through the hardest times. And it meant leaving Yates, at least physically. They could promise to make it work, could plan visits and write letters, but Vivienne had seen enough of life to know that good intentions often crumbled under the weight of reality. On the 7th day, she made her decision. She found Yates repairing a broken chair in the back room, his hands steady as he worked. "I am not taking the job," she said without preamble. He looked up, surprise evident on his face. "Why not?" "Because I have spent my entire life being told where I belong and where I do not. I have let other people's judgment shape my choices, even when I was trying to resist it. But this is my life, and I get to decide what matters most to me." She moved closer to him. "What matters most is being here, in this place that is my home, despite everything, with the people who are my family, with you. Vivienne, I do not want you to give up opportunities because of me. I am not. I am choosing what I value over what might be easier or more lucrative. I am choosing love over running away." She took his hands. "Unless you do not want me to stay?" "Of course I want you to stay. I want that more than anything." He pulled her close, his voice rough with emotion. "But I do not want you to resent me later for a choice you made now. I could never resent you. You have given me more than anyone else ever has. You have given me someone who sees me, really sees me, and loves what he sees. That is worth more than any amount of money or respectability." They held each other in the dusty back room, surrounded by broken furniture and the smell of wood shavings, and Vivienne felt absolutely certain of her choice. This was where she belonged, not because the town accepted her, but because she accepted herself, and because Yates accepted her, and that was enough. Spring came eventually, as it always does, bringing with it new growth and new possibilities. The Red Garter's business improved as winter-weary miners and cowboys ventured back into town. The hostility from the respectable citizens did not disappear, but it softened slightly, perhaps worn down by time, and Vivienne's refusal to be cowed. In April, Yates asked Vivienne to marry him. They were on their spot overlooking the town, the same place they had first admitted their love, and he knelt in the new grass with a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother. "I know I cannot give you a conventional life," he said. "I know marrying me will not make the town suddenly accept you. But I love you more than I thought I could love anyone, and I want to build a life with you, whatever that life looks like." "Yes," Vivienne said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, of course yes." They were married in May by a justice of the peace, a simple ceremony attended by Margaret and the Saloon girls. It was not the wedding Vivienne had dreamed of as a child, with a church full of well-wishers and a white dress and flowers. But it was real and honest and full of love, and that made it more beautiful than any fantasy. The town's reaction was predictably hostile. Several customers stopped coming to the Red Garter entirely, disgusted that the establishment would celebrate such a union. But others, particularly some of the working-class men who had always treated Vivienne with basic decency, congratulated the couple and bought extra drinks to toast their health. Yates and Vivienne moved into a small house on the edge of town, a two-room structure that had been vacant for years. It was not much, but it was theirs. They furnished it slowly with a combination of cast-off furniture from the saloon and pieces Yates built himself. Vivienne planted a small garden, determined to make something grow in the rocky soil. She continued to work at the Red Garter, playing piano most nights, and Yates continued his role keeping the peace. But now they had a home to return to, a space that was wholly theirs, where they could close out the judgment of the world and simply be together. Life settled into a rhythm. Days of work and nights of music, small domestic routines, and stolen moments of tenderness. Vivienne learned that marriage was both easier and harder than she had imagined. Easier because having a partner meant never facing difficulties alone. Harder because two people with their own histories and habits had to learn to navigate life as a unit rather than as individuals. But they worked at it, with patience and humor and a deep underlying commitment to each other. When Yates had bad days, when the ghosts of the war came back and left him distant and haunted, Vivienne sat with him quietly, playing soft music on the small, upright piano he had saved for months to buy her. When Vivienne struggled with the weight of the town's ongoing judgment, Yates reminded her of her strength, of how far she had come, of the fact that where she was raised had made her stronger than those who condemned her. In September, Vivienne realized she was pregnant. The news filled her with equal parts joy and terror. Bringing a child into the world under their circumstances seemed both miraculous and terrifying. How could they protect a baby from the same judgments they had faced? "We will love our child," Yates said when she voiced her fears. "We will teach them that their worth is not determined by what other people think. We will give them what we had to find for ourselves, which is the knowledge that they are enough exactly as they are. What if the town treats our baby the way they treated me? Then our baby will learn early what it means to stand tall in the face of cruelty. And they will have us, and Margaret, and everyone at the Red Garter. They will have a family that chose to be together, which is sometimes stronger than blood." He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "This child is already lucky, because they will be loved completely from their first breath." His certainty soothed her, and as the months passed and her belly grew, Vivienne allowed herself to feel excited rather than afraid. They prepared the second room of their small house as a nursery, painting the walls a cheerful yellow and building a cradle from scratch. Margaret knitted blankets and tiny clothes, and the Saloon girls competed to spoil the baby before it was even born. The pregnancy was not easy. Vivienne was sick frequently in the early months, and as she grew larger, the physical discomfort made playing piano difficult. But she persisted, working until her 8th month before finally agreeing to rest more. The baby came in early March of 1878, during a late spring snowstorm. The midwife, a practical woman who did not care about social standing as long as she was paid, arrived quickly and helped Vivienne through hours of labor. Yates stayed beside her the entire time, holding her hand and offering support, even though he was clearly terrified. When their son was finally born, screaming his displeasure at the cold world, Vivienne looked into his tiny red face and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. This was her child, hers and Yates's, a miracle born of love in the face of everything trying to break them. "He is perfect," Yates said, his voice thick with tears. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names but never decided definitely. Now, looking at her baby boy, Vivienne knew. "Samuel, after the reporter who told our story honestly." "Samuel Sullivan. I like it." Yates kissed her forehead gently. "You were so brave. I am in awe of you." "I am just glad it is over," Vivienne said with a weak laugh. "That was harder than anything I have ever done." "You say that now, but wait until he starts walking and getting into everything." The comment made her laugh, and the baby in her arms squirmed at the sound. She looked down at him, at his impossibly small fingers and his shock of dark hair, and felt a fierce protectiveness rise in her chest. This child would be loved. This child would know his worth. This child would grow up understanding that family was not just blood, but choice and commitment and unconditional acceptance. The town's reaction to Samuel's birth was mixed. Some people softened slightly, unable to maintain their hostility in the face of an innocent baby. Others doubled down, suggesting that Vivienne and Yates were unfit parents who would raise the child in wickedness. But Vivienne and Yates ignored them all. They focused on their small family, on learning to navigate the exhausting, wonderful chaos of new parenthood. Samuel was a hungry baby who woke frequently, leaving both his parents bleary-eyed and stumbling. But he was also a happy baby, quick to smile and gurgle contentedly when held. Vivienne returned to work at the Red Garter after 2 months, bringing Samuel with her. Margaret set up a small area behind the bar where the baby could sleep while Vivienne played piano. The saloon girls doted on him, taking turns holding him and singing to him. He became a fixture of the establishment, the baby raised in a saloon, just as his mother had been. "History repeating," Margaret observed one evening, watching Vivienne nurse Samuel while taking a break from playing. "In some ways, but not in others." Vivienne looked down at her son. "He has both his parents. He has a stable home. He has people who love him without reservation." "That he does, and that makes all the difference." Margaret patted Vivienne's shoulder. "You and Yates are good parents. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise." As Samuel grew from infant to toddler, he proved to have his mother's musical ear and his father's steady temperament. He babbled along to Vivienne's piano playing and followed Yates around like a shadow whenever his father was home. He was curious about everything, fearless in the way of small children who do not yet understand danger. Life was not easy. Money was always tight, and the work was hard. Vivienne's hands ached from playing piano for hours every night, and Yates carried the weight of constantly being on alert for trouble. But they had each other, and they had their son, and they had carved out a space in an unforgiving world where love was more important than judgment. In the summer of Samuel's 2nd year, something unexpected happened. Mrs. Henderson's granddaughter, a girl of 15 who had been living with relatives in Denver, came to stay in Golden. The girl, whose name was Catherine, was pregnant and unwed, a scandal that threatened to destroy Mrs. Henderson's carefully maintained reputation. Desperate and with nowhere else to turn, Mrs. Henderson appeared at the Red Garter one evening after closing. Margaret answered the door, shock evident on her face. "I need help," Mrs. Henderson said without preamble. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. "My granddaughter needs a safe place to stay until the baby comes. I cannot keep her at my house without everyone knowing and talking. Please." Margaret looked at her for a long moment. This was the woman who had led the charge against them, who had tried to have the saloon shut down, who had made Vivienne's life miserable for years. Every instinct said to turn her away, to let her taste the judgment she had so freely dispensed to others. But Margaret was not cruel. "Let me talk to Vivienne." She found Vivienne cleaning up after the evening's work. "Mrs. Henderson is here, asking for help for her pregnant granddaughter." Vivienne felt a flash of anger. "You mean the same Mrs. Henderson who has spent years treating me like dirt because I was raised here?" "Yes, that one." "And you want me to help her?" "I want you to decide. This is your home, too. If you say no, I will support that decision completely." Vivienne thought about it, her emotions warring. Part of her wanted revenge, wanted Mrs. Henderson to suffer the way she had suffered, but another part the part that Yates had nurtured with his steady love and acceptance, whispered that perpetuating cruelty only created more cruelty. "We will help her," Vivienne said finally. "But Mrs. Henderson has to understand something. Her granddaughter will be treated with kindness and respect while she is here. And when this is over, Mrs. Henderson needs to recognize her own hypocrisy in condemning others for circumstances that can happen to anyone." Margaret went back to deliver the terms, and Mrs. Henderson agreed, humbled by necessity. Catherine arrived the next day, a scared girl with frightened eyes who looked at the saloon like it might swallow her whole. Vivienne worked to make her comfortable, giving her one of the upstairs rooms and ensuring the saloon girls understood the situation. They rallied around Catherine with surprising gentleness, these women who understood better than most what it meant to be judged for choices made in desperation or ignorance. Over the next months, Catherine slowly relaxed. She helped with small tasks around the saloon, and in the evenings she would sit and listen to Vivienne play piano. One night, she asked if Vivienne could teach her. "Why do you want to learn?" Vivienne asked. "Because when I listen to you play, it seems like everything bad goes away for a little while. I want to be able to do that for myself." So Vivienne taught her, patient lessons in the quiet hours when the saloon was closed. Catherine had talent, a natural sense of rhythm and melody. She was also smart, asking questions and working hard to improve. "You are good at this," Vivienne told her one afternoon. "With practice, you could play professionally." My grandmother would die of shame, but there was a hint of defiance in Catherine's voice, the first signs of a spine developing. "Your grandmother's shame is her problem, not yours. Your life is your own, Catherine. Do not let anyone else write your story." When Catherine's baby came in late October, a healthy girl she named Rose, something shifted in the dynamic between the saloon and the town. Mrs. Henderson, forced to confront her own situation and the kindness she had received from those she had condemned, began to question her previous certainties. She came to visit Catherine and Rose at the Red Garter, and Vivienne watched as the older woman looked around with new eyes. The saloon was clean, well-maintained. The women were not the fallen creatures of her imagination, but regular people trying to survive. And Vivienne, the young woman she had treated with such contempt, was kind and patient with Catherine, teaching her skills and building her confidence. "I owe you an apology," Mrs. Henderson said to Vivienne one afternoon when Catherine was napping and the baby slept beside her. "Yes, you do." The bluntness seemed to surprise her, but Vivienne was past the point of softening truths to make others comfortable. "I judged you without knowing you. I let fear and prejudice guide me instead of compassion. I am sorry for the pain I caused." "Mrs." Henderson's voice shook. "Watching my granddaughter go through this, seeing how easily circumstances can change a life, I understand now how wrong I was. I appreciate the apology, but apologizing to me is not enough. You need to apologize to everyone you hurt with your actions, and you need to change how you treat people moving forward." Vivienne met her eyes steadily. "You led a campaign to shut down this place that has been a refuge for people with nowhere else to go. You made my life harder for years because you needed someone to feel superior to. An apology is a start, but it is only a start. What do you want me to do? I want you to use whatever influence you have to change how this town treats the Red Garter and everyone associated with it. I want you to stand up the next time someone spreads gossip or judgment. I want you to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem." "Mrs." Henderson nodded slowly. "I will try. I cannot promise to change everyone's minds, but I can promise to change my own actions." It was not everything, but it was something. And true to her word, Mrs. Henderson did begin to change. She spoke up in church when others condemned the saloon. She patronized the Red Garter's lunch service openly, inviting other women to join her. She shared her granddaughter's story selectively, using it to illustrate how quickly anyone's circumstances could change. The impact was gradual but real. Some people, particularly other women who had daughters or sisters, began to soften their stance. The Red Garter's reputation slowly shifted from den of sin to necessary business, from threatening to simply another part of the town's fabric. It was not a complete transformation. There were still those who held fast to their prejudices, who would never accept Vivienne or the saloon or anything associated with either. But the atmosphere became less hostile, more neutral, and that was progress. Samuel grew into a bright, active boy who charmed everyone he met. He started helping out at the saloon when he was old enough, sweeping floors and wiping tables. He showed no signs of being damaged by his unconventional upbringing. Instead, he was kind, curious, and remarkably mature for his age, comfortable talking to people from all walks of life. "Where you were raised made you strong," Yates told him one day when Samuel asked why some kids at school were not allowed to play with him. "You said that to Mama once," Samuel replied. He was 7 now, old enough to understand that some people judged his family. "I did, and it is true for her, and it is true for you. Being raised here, seeing how hard people work and how complex life can be, that is teaching you things other children will not learn until they are much older, if they learn them at all. I do not mind mostly. I like it here. Everyone is nice to me. We are family here. Not blood family, but chosen family. Sometimes that is even stronger." Yates ruffled his son's dark hair. "You remember that. And you remember that you are loved completely, no matter what anyone else says or thinks." In 1883, when Samuel was 5 and Vivienne was 30, Margaret's health began to decline. The woman who had been a pillar of strength for decades was finally showing her age. She moved slower, tired more easily, and spent more time resting than working. "I am getting old," she told Vivienne matter-of-factly one afternoon. "You are not old. You are just tired." "Same thing eventually," Margaret smiled gently. "I need to talk to you about something important." "What is it?" "I want to leave the Red Garter to you. I have no children of my own, and you are the closest thing to a daughter I have ever had. The saloon should be yours when I am gone." "Do not talk like that. You are not going anywhere. We all go somewhere eventually, girl. I would rather face it honestly than pretend otherwise." Margaret took Vivienne's hand. "You have made this place more than it was. Your music, your kindness, your strength, all of it has shaped the Red Garter into something I am proud of. I want you to continue that legacy." Vivienne felt tears burning in her eyes. "I do not know if I can run this place without you." "Of course you can. You have been helping me run it for years. And you will have Yates beside you, and the girls, and all the knowledge I have spent the last 2 decades teaching you." Margaret squeezed her hand. "Promise me you will keep it going. Promise me you will continue to give women a safe place to work and earn money fairly. Promise me you will keep the tradition of protecting those who have nowhere else to go." "I promise." The words were a vow, spoken through tears. Margaret lingered for another 2 years, gradually fading, but maintaining her sharp mind and sharper tongue until the end. When she finally passed in the spring of 1885, the entire town mourned, even those who had condemned her in life. Her funeral was held at the Red Garter, since no church would host it, and the saloon overflowed with people who came to pay their respects. Vivienne played piano at the service, playing all of Margaret's favorite songs through tears. Yates stood beside her, Samuel on his other side, a united family saying goodbye to the woman who had made their lives possible. True to her word, Margaret had left everything to Vivienne. The saloon, the building, all of it passed into her hands. It was an enormous responsibility, one that sometimes felt crushing, but Vivienne rose to meet it, drawing on everything Margaret had taught her, and on the support of Yates and the community they had built. Under her management, the Red Garter continued to thrive. She implemented new policies, making sure the working girls had even better protections and clearer contracts. She expanded the lunch service, turning it into a popular meeting place for workers who wanted good food at fair prices. She hired Catherine to help with the piano, playing when her wrists started bothering her from years of use. The town's attitude toward Vivienne continued to evolve. She would never be fully accepted by everyone, but she had earned a grudging respect from most. She was seen as a successful businesswoman, a devoted mother, and someone who contributed to the community, despite having every reason to turn her back on it. Yates remained her constant partner, in business and in life. They weathered the ups and downs together, the lean months when business was slow, and the busy months when they barely had time to breathe. They navigated the challenges of raising Samuel, watching with pride as he grew into a thoughtful young man who treated everyone with kindness, regardless of their station. In 1890, when Vivienne was 36 and Yates was 41, they had another child, a daughter they named Margaret in honor of the woman who would change both their lives. Little Maggie, as they called her, had her mother's red hair and her father's gray eyes, and from birth she seemed to have an old soul, watching the world with serious contemplation. Samuel adored his baby sister, taking his role as big brother seriously. At 12, he was old enough to be a real help with her, entertaining her for hours and making her laugh with silly faces and gentle tickling. Life settled into a new rhythm, fuller and more complex with 2 children. The Red Garter remained successful, providing a good living for the family and employment for a rotating cast of women who needed the work and the safety it provided. Vivienne had created exactly what Margaret had envisioned, a place where women could earn decent money in decent conditions, where they were protected and valued. The years passed, bringing changes both large and small. Samuel decided he wanted to become a teacher, a choice that filled Vivienne with fierce pride. He studied hard, eventually earning a position at the school in Golden, where he had once been shunned. He taught with compassion and patience, always mindful of the students who did not fit in, who were judged for circumstances beyond their control. Maggie showed early signs of her mother's musical talent, and Vivienne began teaching her piano as soon as her hands were big enough to reach the keys. The girl was a natural, picking up songs by ear and composing simple melodies before she could write them down. The town continued to evolve too. The wildness of the early frontier days faded as civilization took firmer root. The Red Garter became less of a controversial presence and more of an established institution. New people moved to Golden, and not all of them carried the old prejudices. Some even sought out the saloon specifically because of the articles that had been written about it over the years, curious about the place that had defied expectations. Vivienne and Yates grew older together, their love deepening with time rather than fading. They knew each other completely by now, all the scars and strengths, all the fears and dreams. They had built a life that was not easy or conventional, but it was theirs, and it was good. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1897, Yates surprised Vivienne by taking her back to their spot overlooking the town. It was a beautiful spring evening, the mountains still capped with snow, while the valley below bloomed with new growth. "Remember the first time we came here?" Yates asked, his arm around her waist. "I remember everything about those early days. How scared I was, how uncertain." Vivienne leaned into him. "How you made me feel like I was worth loving." "You were always worth loving. I just had the good fortune to see it." He turned to face her. 20 years, Vivienne. 20 years of being married to the strongest, most remarkable woman I have ever known. 20 years of watching you take everything the world threw at you and turn it into something beautiful. I would not change a single moment. Not even the hard parts? Especially not the hard parts. Those are what taught us who we were and what we could survive together. He cupped her face in his weathered hands. "I love you more now than I did on our wedding day, and I loved you pretty desperately even then. I love you too. Everything good in my life came from taking a chance on you." She kissed him softly. "You saw me when everyone else looked through me. You told me that where I was raised made me strong instead of made me less. You gave me the courage to stop apologizing for being myself." They stood together as the sun set over Golden, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting. Their life had not been the fairy tale Vivienne might have imagined as a girl, but it was better because it was real. It was messy and complicated and sometimes difficult, but it was also full of love and purpose and belonging. The Red Garter continued to operate, passing eventually to Maggie when Vivienne and Yates were too old to manage it themselves. She ran it with the same principles her mother and grandmother Margaret had established, creating a haven for women who needed work and respect. The saloon became a family legacy, 3 generations of women ensuring that there was always a place for those society tried to cast aside. Samuel married a woman who saw past his unconventional upbringing to the kind, intelligent man he had become. They had 4 children who grew up knowing their grandmother Vivienne as a force of nature, a woman who played piano beautifully and spoke her mind fearlessly and loved fiercely without reservation. Vivienne and Yates grew old together in their small house on the edge of town, the house that had sheltered them through so many years. Their bodies aged and slowed, but their minds remained sharp and their love remained constant. They spent their days in comfortable routine, Vivienne still playing piano, though her fingers were not as nimble as they once were, Yates still watching over her even when there was nothing left to protect her from except time itself. On a cool autumn evening in 1912, Vivienne sat at her piano with Yates beside her, just as they had done 1,000 times before. She was 58 now, her red hair liberally streaked with gray, her hands bearing the marks of decades of work. Yates was 63, his dark hair completely silver, his body bearing the scars of a hard life lived fully. "Play our song," he said quietly. She did not need to ask which one he meant. Her fingers found the keys of the melody she had composed so many years ago, the unnamed song that spoke of loneliness and strength, of hope and survival. It had been the first thing she played for him, and it had become theirs over the years, a musical representation of their journey together. As she played, Yates took her free hand, holding it gently. They sat together in the gathering darkness, the music washing over them like a blessing, and Vivienne felt a profound sense of peace. Her life had been hard, shaped by circumstances that could have broken her, but instead, those circumstances had made her strong, just as Yates had said all those years ago. She had been shunned for being raised in a saloon, judged and condemned by people who never bothered to know her. But she had survived that judgment and built a life of meaning despite it. She had found love with a man who saw her worth when others saw only shame. She had raised children who understood that compassion mattered more than convention. She had created a legacy of protection and dignity for women who needed it most. Where she had been raised had not diminished her. It had shaped her into someone capable of extraordinary strength and love. And that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all. She finished playing and turned to look at Yates, finding him watching her with the same love she saw in his eyes every day. They did not need words anymore. Everything important had been said 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways. They simply sat together, hand in hand, as the evening deepened around them. Their grandchildren would tell stories about them for years to come, about the woman who had been shunned but never broken, and the cowboy who had seen her strength when others saw only scandal. They would speak of a love that had defied expectations and survived decades, a love that had built a family and a legacy and a place of safety in an often harsh world. And in those stories, in the lives that continued long after Vivienne and Yates were gone, their love lived on. It lived on in every act of kindness, every moment of standing up against injustice, every choice to see someone's worth instead of society's judgment. It lived on in music played on an old piano, in a saloon that continued to offer refuge, in grandchildren and great-grandchildren who knew that where you came from mattered less than who you chose to be. Vivienne Norton, Sullivan, had been raised in a saloon, and it had made her strong. She had been loved by Yates Sullivan, and it had made her whole. Together, they had built something beautiful in a world that tried to tell them they could not. And that was a story worth telling, a love worth remembering, a life worth living fully and without apology from beginning to end.